Okay, hi everyone. So this is the YouTube video tutorial that's going to review the peer editing reflection essay. I did look at the video that I had initially, and because I made certain changes, the original video is not gonna necessarily explain all the details that I changed. So I'm just gonna do this video. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to forego the introduction and just sort of focus on the important. Well, it's all important, but just the things that you need. But I do encourage you to read just the introduction, so you can sort of understand the background about uh, understanding the idea of reflexive sociology and how does that relate to pedagogy or the theory and practice of how to teach and how to learn. Okay. But the first thing I wanted to sort of draw your attention to, so this essay won't be due until March 22nd, which is a week and a half from today. And what you're going to do pretty much for this assignment is that you're going to assess the whole process of doing the peer editing exercise. That's taking the notes, or sorry, that's the first thing is, like taking the notes and then as well as the work that you have done getting sorry the work that you have done for the assigned essay that I assigned to you a couple of weeks ago. Okay. And as I mentioned, it's due Saturday, March 22nd. So let me just go, and these are the materials that you're going to need: the miniature guide to critical thinking, how to write a paragraph, use Purdue Owl, and have a dictionary and thesaurus at the ready. Right, because that's also a comment that I've made in I forgot how many, but I made that a substantial comment. When you're writing, you should always have a dictionary. You should always have a thesaurus as well as you having a writing manual. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I found some writing PDF writing manuals that I'll post that you could use and you could have and use them for other courses that you're taking at Dominguez Hills. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sort of break this up into like two videos, maybe. All right. Depending on how much time the app allows me, because it only allows me to record like 30 minutes at a time. So I'm going to go over the introduction, the essay assessment, evaluating the editing process, and then self-evaluation and discussion. Okay. All right. So for the introduction, what you're going to do is pretty much what you did for me in the peer editing exercise that you submitted to me last week. Is that it's going to be the introduction and the roadmap for your reader. So then, just like what I asked you to do for the peer editing exercise, I strongly recommend that you write that section last and do everything first. Okay. So that's for the introduction. All right. Now for the essay assessment. So, oh, sorry. Before I forget, I also may want to remind you that I do want to have the introduction, the part two essay assessment, part three evaluating the editing process, part four self evaluation, and part five the discussion. All right, and as I mentioned in the prior video that I did for the assignment, it just helps you as the writer to keep focused and develop your ideas. Right, and that's one of the main points is that when you make a claim like it is raining, then you need to be able to provide evidence to show that it is raining, right? So that's sort of an issue that needs to be addressed because do not go under the assumption, and you probably heard this from other professors, don't necessarily assume that just because I'm teaching the class that I understand what you are trying to convey to me through your writing. You should never have that assumption. You should always assume that the person that you're writing to or for is doesn't necessarily know what your topic is. So you, as the writer and the generator of ideas, need to show how you arrive to certain types of understanding, right? And in this particular exercise, is one of those moments that you really need to pay attention, and as I mentioned before, how you relate to writing. Okay. All right. So I'll get off my soapbox for now and then just go over these sections. Now, so going over part two, the essay assessment. So, what you're going to do for this particular section is pretty much just sort of look at and contemplate and think through critically um, the work that you did on the assigned essay that I assigned to you a couple of weeks ago. And all you're going to be doing just addressing these points, and you're not necessarily going to address every point. All right. So you need also to be cognizant or aware what points you're going to address and what points you're not going to address. Because if you try to address all the points, it's not going to make sense. All right. So this is where Paul and Elder talk about this idea of critical thinking. So it's not just an automatic response and assuming just because it's there and just because the professor put it there does not necessarily mean that you have to address that particular point if that particular point does not necessarily fit the overall goal of what you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so that's how I set up these writing assignments. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is, of course, you're going to sort of explain what you're going to do here, right? Because you always need to inform your reader what the goal is for each section. So here you're just going to do an essay assessment. All right. So then the after you do like this brief introduction, then you're going to address this point. What is your overall assessment of your peer's essay? Was the essay persuasive? Was it informative, or did it lack any persuasive or informative essay? So, if the essay that I assigned to you a couple of weeks ago does is persuasive and informative, then pretty much you would just address these 2 points, right? Point A and point B. If the essay did not have a persuasive argument or was informative, then you would address point C. All right. So does that make sense? All right. And then for either A or B or A and B or C, you're going to write a paragraph. You're going to make a claim. All right. And you're going to draw the claim, for example, saying the essay lacked a persuasive and lacked information to convey certain ideas. So that is your claim. So then the next thing that you're going to do is literally take some part of the essay that I assigned to you and use that as evidence. But you need to introduce that statement so your reader can understand why you're using that sentence or statement. And then once you sort of relate that statement to the claim, then you do the critical description and the critical analysis, or sorry, explanation about how that particular sentence or passage is indicative of the essay not having a persuasive argument or an informative argument. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay. Right. And that's what you're going to do for each of these points for this essay, and pretty much you're going to do for any essay that you write for any class. You make a claim, you explain what the claim is, then you find relevant evidence from the source, and then explain how that source relates to the claim and why you're using it to demonstrate a particular point that you're trying to make. Okay. And then once you're done with that, then you're going to go to point two. And this one is asking you, please determine if the essay was well organized. Is the essay organized logically based on how the writer wrote the manuscript? And an example is A plus B equals C. I don't necessarily use this type of general formatting, but it is foundational to the way that I write because I try to write what is known as a dialectically writing, where I'm always assessing between what I wrote previously and how I'm able to carry the argument further and taking the argument deeper from the previous section or the previous paragraph. All right. And that you're making sure that as you're making that argument, that dialectical argument, that you're using relevant terminology, appropriate examples, and constructing an argument that fits the context that you're presenting to your reader. Right. So that's for point A. Then for point B, is there evidence? Oh, typo. All right, I got to fix that. So is there? Oh, no, that's right. Is there evidence from the manuscript? Yeah, that's right. I'm thinking of the wrong text. Tense. A manuscript that the writer presented a thesis statement or a question guiding the direction of the manuscript. Right. If they have a thesis statement or a question, then you would identify it if they had it somewhere in the manuscript. What usually tends to happen is like the thesis statement and or the question is usually presented at the beginning of the essay, um, and that's sort of where it should be. But sometimes writers do put it at the middle, right? And personally, I don't like it when they do that. I appreciate it more if they actually say it up front, so then I have a general idea what they're going to be writing about. Okay, so that's like my personal preference. But anyway, so then you're going to address point B. And then point C, does the manuscript effectively use sources in the manuscript? Meaning, do they identify the writer or their sources, the year of publication? Do they connect the writer's ideas they borrow from their source? Sorry about that. Source to the peers assigned essay, meaning if they quote a writer, do they identify who the writer is? Do they explain why that writer is relevant at that particular juncture of the writing process? And how will that writer's ideas contribute to the development of your own ideas, or of the ideas of the assigned essay that you edited and submitted last week, right? So then once you complete that one, then you're going to go to point three, or lowercase Roman numeral three. Do they show how the quote relates to the assigned writer's essay, or does it seem fractured? And what I mean by fractured is that the essay itself is not cohesive. That each paragraph looks like it's presenting its own argument without showing any type of connection to what was written prior to it, and how that particular paragraph is going to direct and instruct the reader what direction that they're going to go into. Well, sorry, the direction that they're going to take in the essay. Right. And for the many years that I've been teaching and reading essays, it's at this point I'm able to identify those types of essays, right? But I'm sort of trying to give you a general descriptor, and providing an explanation is that you want to try to make sure that the essays you write are cohesive, meaning that each part of the essay sentences and paragraphs and sections all point in the same direction and provide narratives that support the main claim of the argument of the essay. Because without those elements, it just reads more like a laundry list of clauses and statements without an overriding context. Right, just like the issue of talking about the color black, where from what I recall, many of the essays didn't have a specific context of how they were going to accomplish in describing the color black to a person who was blind. Okay, all right. So like that's sort of for the it's related, and then three, you're going to address: do they properly cite the quote or paraphrase the source that they used? Right. So like if they use a quote, sorry about that, my cats. Hey, you two, stop it. Delinquents. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, getting back to this. So then, yeah, so you want to make sure that they cite quotes accurately, identifying the author, identifying the year of publication, and then providing the quote, making sure they have quotation marks, and then some type of citation at the end of that quote. And the quote can either be ASA, sorry, the format of the quote can either be ASA, APA, or MLA. As long as the writer of the assigned essay is consistent and uses proper citation formatting. If you're not sure about the proper citation formatting, go to Purdue OWL and see which style that particular student is using, and making sure that it's properly formatted. Right, because later on, as we get closer to the end of the semester, you're going to do a module on citations, and one of the points that I have you do is to actually read a vignette where a professor couldn't publish an article because he didn't have the correct year of publication. Right. So it's very important to be able to identify the year of publication, and also giving credit where credit is due. Right. And then point four is, do they properly cite the page from where they obtained the quote? That's sort of what I just described. And then, do they provide examples showing how they arrive at critical points in the argument? Meaning, if you make a claim that it's raining outside, does the evidence support the claim that it is raining outside? You could say something. Yeah, you check the weather either on TV or online or on a social media platform. You look outside a window or a door, and then that's the evidence that you would use to support the claim. Yes, it is raining outside. All right. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Okay, and then once you're done with that section, then you're going to go to part three and evaluating the essay process. Okay, so then what you're going to do here is, then again, write another short paragraph explaining what you're going to do in this section, and then you start addressing these points. Was your So I'm asking you, what was your first impression when when reading the assigned essay? And this is sort of asking you, or reflecting on. Sorry, look, I was looking for the word reflecting on the your first initial impressions of the essay. And that's sort of why I had you do the notes, so I could also see what were your initial impressions of the essay, and that's also why I requested that the notes you take are organized in some fashion based on either punctuation, argumentation, cohesiveness, and other elements that you need to pay attention to when you are writing. Okay. And then once you're done with that, then you go to point two. What was your experience in editing your peer's essay? Was it easy? Was it challenging? Was it a mixture of both? So depending on how the student who wrote that particular essay, how they wrote it, will determine in some way the manner in which how you're going to edit that paper. If the essay was not organized well, or not clearly articulating its ideas, the editing is going to be a lot more challenging compared to someone else who carefully tries to construct appropriate sentences, and making sure the sentences produce a cohesive paragraph, and that the cohesive paragraph relates to the subsequent paragraphs, which eventually gives the overall impression of what is being conveyed in that manuscript. This is how carefully you need to learn how to read, because again, when you go to grad school, this is what you're going to learn. All right, so I'm trying to give you like the heads up, to so to speak. So when you do apply and get accepted into a graduate program, it's not necessarily a shock to you, right? Because at least you'll have a general idea of what to expect. Okay. So then, based on what your assessment and impression of the essay, you just pick one of these three, right? You don't need to write about all three, just one of the three. And then once you write that, then you're going to go to point three. And then, how was reading the manuscript style of writing? Was it easy? Was it challenging? Or was it a mixture of both? Meaning, certain parts of the essay, was it easy to read overall? Or were there certain areas in the essay that were challenging? Or was it just a challenge from from the first sentence to the last sentence? Right. So you need to be able to determine that, and then you make your claim, and then you use the evidence from the essay to support the claim. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. And then when you're going to go to point number four, what were your thoughts on editing one sentence or a sentence? Was it easy? Was it challenging, or a mixture of both? Right. And then, oh, sorry about that. And then you're going to, sorry, close that. And then you're going to go to point number five, where what were your thoughts when you paraphrase the paragraph? I mean, yeah, the paragraph. And then you go to the paragraph that you paraphrase, and was it easy? Was it challenging, or a mixture of both? But you notice it's still asking you the same three questions, but you need to determine, based on your understanding of the essay, how you're going to approach it and address each point, and making sure that all of it makes sense, and that each sentence in each paragraph supports one another. Right. So I'm just going to stop here, and then I'm going to do another video, because I don't want to necessarily run out of time and then just sort of try to remember what I said last. So I'm going to stop here at part four, self evaluation, and that's where the next video is going to start. Okay. So I'll